share incredible, inspiring, and powerful sobriety stories. We are here to show sobriety is possible, one story at a time. Let's go! How's it going, everyone? Great to have you again for another episode. I had a few thoughts over the last week and a half about people reaching out. Things didn't go the way they wanted it to with their alcohol-free or their sobriety journey. And I get it. You can feel like you failed. Like this is never going to work out. I mean, people, I think, reflect on how many times they've tried and find themselves back to the beginning. And man, do I ever relate to that. I hope you guys never get the impression that I got all this figured out my first try, because that's so far from the truth. There was a ton of intervention, a lot of consequences, a lot of pain, a lot of me not being honest with myself. And I put up this thing on Instagram a while back that sober people just gave it one more try. That's all that's required here, is to give it one more try. Beating ourselves up, feeling like we're failures, although I get it, it doesn't help us out. We've got to dust ourselves off and get back up and get back at it. Start with a day. Even though we want things the easy way, the only way to get through 30 is to get through that first day first, that second day, and that third day. And before we know it, we're into years. And it's just magical how it all plays out. And all the benefits and the ways our lives change. For me anyway, and for so many other stories that we've heard here on the podcast. So if you're struggling with that day one, you feel like you're never going to get it, the best advice and direction I ever got was you got to find a way to get back up, to get back at it, find some support, find some people that you could connect with, to not feel so alone on this journey of sobriety. Now let's get to this episode. In this emotional and powerful episode, we welcome Melissa, who courageously shares her journey to sobriety. From struggling with alcohol during her teenage years in Wisconsin to moving to New York to pursue a career in theater. Melissa's story is filled with ups and downs. She discusses how her alcohol use escalated during her adult life, with insights on the challenges of quitting alcohol, the importance of community support, and her continuous journey toward a healthy life. This episode is a heartfelt reminder that sobriety is achievable. Tune in to hear Melissa's story of resilience, determination, and reclaiming her life. And this is Melissa's story on the Sober Motivation Podcast. It was vital in keeping me accountable. It doesn't interrupt my life, it only enhances my life. People in my program swore by it. These are just a few quotes from SoberLink users. SoberLink is not just any breathalyzer, it's the breathalyzer designed specifically for those in recovery from alcohol addiction. How it works is simple. You'll test at the same time every day. A built-in camera will take a photo during your test so it knows it's you testing. Tamper sensors will flag any attempts to cheat. And instant, easy-to-read results are sent directly to your loved ones because it's not just about proving you're sober. It's about sharing your success, establishing patterns of trust, and dispelling doubts with hard evidence. SoberLink, proof of sobriety at your fingertips. Visit soberlink.com/recover to sign up and receive $50 off your device. Welcome back to another episode of the Sober Motivation Podcast. Today we've got Melissa with us. How are you?
Hi, Brad. It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I feel like our time was due to do a podcast recording because we've been crossing paths in a lot of different areas, it seems, over the last couple of months. So I'm so happy to have you here.
Happy to be here.
So what was it like for you growing up?
So for me growing up, it was pretty idyllic. I grew up in Wisconsin and in a family that was very loving and supportive. I have a younger brother, and small town growing up where we played with the neighbors outside till the sun set, and my mom rang a big bell for when it was time to come in and kick the can and all those fun games growing up, riding our bikes. Before the internet, kids got out and played quite a bit. So we had a really good life in this little small town. And when I think about what role alcohol played, in my family's life. My dad drank, not to excess. He had a party drinking lifestyle. If there was a party going on, we had a pool in the backyard, so sometimes there were pool parties, and he had a big goblet that he would fill with a margarita. And it was a joke, one of those big 64-ounce cups, and he was like the king drinking from it. But my mom didn't drink, and my grandfather was an alcoholic. I didn't know that as a kid, but when we would go to visit my grandmother, they were divorced. We would go visit her, and we would stop off and see him on the way, and his house was dark and dank and smelled like cigarettes, and he was very unhealthy looking, just had an ashy look to him. And as a young kid, I didn't put those things together. It wasn't until later on. But yeah, it was pretty typical, which was good that it wasn't much of an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I've had a few people on the show from Wisconsin, and the accent comes out here and there. It seems like a lot of people from there, though, share in one way or another a similar story of it just being, readily available, and it was just involved with a lot of different areas. Did you grow up in a smaller town, like when you went to school
Yeah.
and stuff, it would just be a small class size?
Yeah, my town was 5,000 people. My high school class was 98. A lot of farm country. We lived in the town. There was a stop sign. I don't even think there were traffic lights. Yeah, so it was a great place to grow up as a kid. As I got older and got to be a teenager, I found it incredibly boring. And I looked for outside stimulation, which was very easy to find. In Wisconsin, there's drink everywhere. Every home you go to, every friend that I slept over with, there was beer and a basement with a refrigerator and dad's beer collection. And so it wasn't too hard to dabble in that early on. And I definitely did. I was probably 14, 15 years old when I drank for the first time. I don't remember the exact situation. I love it when people do. I don't know if I just don't have that kind of memory. I think it was probably peach schnapps and orange juice. I do. And someone's parents were probably gone for the afternoon, and kids came over and we experimented and got sick. And so that happened to me more than a few times. And when I was a freshman in high school, I remember at a dance, we drank before we went to this dance, and showed up at the dance just hammered, and you can't hide it when you're 15 years old. That's not even something you know how to do. I got sick. I'm pretty sure I got sick, and they had to call my dad, and my dad had to come pick me up. And I always had a dad that was like, listen, if you get in trouble, you call me, no questions asked, we'll talk about it in the morning. And that was a really great thing that he was like that. My mom would not have been like that. So after that experience, my parents, I think it came to their attention that we got to do something about this. This was, to me, it was just normal high school behavior, and I wasn't the only one doing it. My grandfather that I mentioned earlier was at this point in the hospital dying from complete organ shutdown, cirrhosis. And they actually took me to the hospital to see him. And it was probably their way of shaking me to say, look, this can happen to you when you're a 15-year-old kid, and that doesn't compute. And I saw him, and he was completely jaundiced and yellow and barely breathing. And it was hard to look at, but it didn't, say to me, I shouldn't do this anymore. They thought that maybe seeing a counselor would help, and I went along with it because they're my parents. They had to tell me what to do, but it didn't really change things for me. On the weekends, as I got older, we would gather at friends' houses, and it became a thing, a bonfire out in the backyard. And I was tall, and I looked older, And once in a while, I would get lucky enough to get served at a liquor store. So wine coolers were big back then with beer. And throughout high school, it was a thing, but it wasn't a huge distraction. I still was on the honor roll. I played sports. I was very active in the theater in my high school and in the community theater. So it wasn't, it was pretty typical, I think.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. You hear a lot of stories like that. I was even thinking about your story of of your parents taking you to see your grandfather, Scared Straight. And I know they used to have this show on A&E, right? Years ago. And it was
Yeah.
so interesting because I